One can think about the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of three phases. The immediate period, which will last until the end of 2021 approximately. The intermediate period, which then goes to the end of 2023. And the post-pandemic period, which begins in 2024 approximately. During the immediate period, we are experiencing the biological and epidemiological shock of the virus. The virus spreads and spreads and spreads until enough people are infected that we reach naturally something known as the herd immunity threshold. And this is the time of the immediate pandemic period in which we would have to live in a changed world, wearing masks, engaging in physical distancing, having periodic business and school closures, and so on. During times of plague, it's very typical for people to become more religious. People stay at home. People become more abstemious. It would take about a year till the end of 2021 before we finally reach this important milestone of herd immunity, either naturally because the virus kept spreading or artificially through vaccination. During the intermediate period, we would have to now recover not from the biological or epidemiological impact of the virus. We would have to recover from the psychological, social, and economic impact of the virus. For every person who dies of the pandemic, perhaps 5 people will be seriously disabled. Millions of people will need ongoing medical care even after the immediate mortality impact of the pandemic is behind us.
Okay, right there you're seeing the Journal of the Plague Years. During this time of plague, that is on CNN, it's a special they're doing. We're going to get into much more of it. In fact, if CNN and others had listened to War Room Pandemic back a year ago in January of 23rd, 24th, 25th, when we started this, we would not be in the mess we're in today, to be quite honest about it. It's Thursday, the 4th of February, year of our Lord, 2021. Now the podcast has over, I think, 33 million plus downloads. We're live also nationwide on the John Frederick Radio Network. We're on Real America's Voice, the streaming service of the Trump Revolution. Up on the satellite, Dish Channel 219 and cable, Comcast Channel 113, and of course, Rumble, Gab, Telegraph, and in Mandarin to the diaspora, the Chinese people, live Beijing worldwide, and also blown through the firewall later in the day to mainland China through G News and GTV. I want to thank our partners over there. And every Wednesday, we put up now, I give an exclusive interview to the European version of GTV in London that we put up later. Okay, we're going to go from Arizona to Chicago to New York to New Hampshire, covering the nation about the pandemic, crime, and politics. Talk a little bit about geopolitics, and I have the great Richard Barris on later to talk about polling. Does Joe Biden have any political capital, and what's the direction where the American people think this thing is going? I want to start with, though, we're going to go to Wyoming here in a moment. To Joey DeCrenta IV up in Carbon County, who started this whole censure process of Liz Cheney. But we wanted to start where we kind of started yesterday with Congressman Matt Gaetz, the firebrand, fire-breathing. And I want everybody, give me that book, Matt. Everybody, we sold so many books yesterday. Firebrand is the book, Matt Gaetz is the congressman. And here's what we want to do. He was drinking champagne last night because of that huge victory. And we wanted to have Gaetz in here. No, but here's what the interesting thing was. What went viral during the day was you saying, hey, I think we've got the votes, but leadership's going to figure out some way to chop block us on the vote itself. And then what the laughing and the beatdown and everything last night is that, hey, they called Gaetz's bluff. They called these populists bluff. They essentially called Trump's bluff and the Trump supporters bluff, and they had a vote. And they didn't do, according to what the outside story is, they didn't pull any gains. So before we go talk to the folks in Wyoming, where you just came back from and gave, I think, the best speech of your career, right? And I don't know if that has any reason that Sergio Gore and Darren Beatty had nothing to do with writing it, right? Just saying.
Two brilliant minds.
Two brilliant minds. Let's. What happened last night? Put us in the room because the American people, particularly the populist movement, needs to know what happened.
We got crushed. We got crushed better than 2-1. The 8 square miles of Washington, D.C. constitute the highest concentration of power for the establishment. It's where most of them live. It's where they do their politics and do their worst many times. I believe that we had a lot of good family talk about what we expect from our leadership. And then right before the vote, Kevin McCarthy stood up, Kevin McCarthy is very popular among the Republicans in Congress, and he made the referendum on Liz Cheney a referendum on him. He said that
in his leadership.
He said that he needed the current leadership team, including Liz Cheney, that he needed Liz Cheney to remain as the conference chair, that he thought it would be very bad for us to replace Liz Cheney, and that he thought it would put us in a worse position for 2022. I have a difference of opinion. I think that it hurts our prospects in 2022 to have a spokesperson for our group as someone who's deeply unpopular among our voters, who's deeply unpopular among our own voters. And so I took a different position than Leader McCarthy, but it is very clear that not just a majority of the Republican conference, but a supermajority of about 2/3 want to keep Liz Cheney, and they are still attached.
They want to keep Liz Cheney if their vote is not out there public. Let me just go back. I want to put us back in the room, and I want to leave Congressman Green off to the side for a second. We're going to get to her because I don't want to have the thing of equivalence,
No,
which
both,
I think a lot this guy smoked. But
right.
I want to go when people stood up at the microphone. How many people talked? This is a 4-hour meeting, I understand, right?
Yeah, I mean, almost.
How many people, when they talked, what was the sense of what their attitudes were towards Liz Cheney?
Frustration that there was no contrition. And what was interesting is that almost every member that spoke against Liz said that we weren't speaking against her vote on impeachment specifically. It was the manner in which she did it in the most destructive way to our conference, to the president, to our movement. And I think that's what hurt people the most. But I am absolutely convinced, just based on how many people spoke up against her and how the vote went, that people literally spoke against Cheney and then voted for her because Kevin McCarthy went all in and put it all on the line to keep Liz Cheney.
Do you think that does his argument wash that he needs his leadership team? He's got to have Liz Cheney, or is this about the donors and about the K Street guys that are going to fund it? And you've had corporations, you've had this problem with the corporations cutting off after January 6th. Is that why he needs her? Or is it some other reason he needs her? And does that argument even wash?
Well, no one in leadership wants to believe that anyone can ever be dislodged from leadership. It's sort of like, once that is shown, I think all of them view that as a tremendous threat, and they shouldn't. There's no reason for that. But you're right. The number one driving principle in our leadership now is that these Fortune 100 companies have withheld PAC money. And when we get on conference calls, our Republican Party leaders say to us, don't worry, they'll get their senses. They'll come back. We just have to love them more. It's sort of battered spouse syndrome. We say it's probably our fault that they don't love us and that they mistreat us. And if we just love them a little more, they'll give us the affection we desire. I think the answer should be the opposite. I'm the only Republican in Congress that doesn't take PAC money. I think we should say if the PACs and the big corporations want to be with the Democrats, let them have them. And don't come crawling back to us. And instead, to go fuel our movement with the people.
Yeah, but if you're McCarthy or Cheney, you can't shoot like that because they can't fundraise from a grassroots level. Right? That's just the case. What we're dealing with here is a situation where we're expecting different results and different behaviors from people who cannot fundamentally adopt those behaviors because it's not within them to do so. McCarthy can't go and put out 2,000 people, in Wyoming. Liz Cheney can't even do it in her own district, let alone get people to part with their hard-earned dollars for what they represent, because what they represent is those fat cat corporations.
You had 2X crowd that Dick Cheney, forget her,
right,
that Dick Cheney had. You had twice on a bitter cold day. Also, for McCarthy, he's got a wounded Cheney who is beholden to him because he saved her publicly and throughout the nation, instead of having Stefanik, who he'd have to get if Stefanik took the job, he would need a food taster, right? I mean, really, because she's on the rise, right? And she now is becoming more and more populist every day as she sees the power of the Trump movement. So it was definitely McCarthy considering himself before the good of where we're taking this, right?
I do believe that there is an element of self-preservation in the decisions that were made yesterday by the leaders who stood up for Liz Cheney. How about that for a generic response?
Here's a fantasy. Let me tell you a fantasy. McCarthy ran around and they did much better than I thought they would do. I'm the first to admit that. However, that was Donald J. Trump. Anybody that thinks McCarthy brought this victory, which I really consider a victory in 2020 for the House candidates, what they did, the number of seats you held and took back, that is on the shoulders of Donald J. Trump in this movement. That is not McCarthy. And McCarthy he's somehow starting to believe that it is him and his leadership team that does this, and looking to 2022. 2022 could be a 2010 Tea Party type massive sweep if we play this correctly, but it's all going to be dependent on the deplorables.
But there's an assumption there, Steve.
Yeah.
What I heard time and again at conference last night was we can't be going after each other because then we'll be weaker in fighting the Democrats. And I just kept thinking back to 2010, and I'm like, well, gosh, in 2010 it was a bloodletting in the primaries and one of our best years against the Democrats. So sometimes a reformation within our own church can help us proselytize better to others.
Big.
Let me just understand this and summarize for the audience here. So McCarthy goes down to Mar-a-Lago, asks for the donor list and whatever, right? Begs the president for his support. President Trump puts out a nice statement saying, okay, we can work together, focus is 2022. Then McCarthy immediately flies back to Washington, D.C., stands in front of the Republican conference and says, please support the woman who attacked
who's on page
the guy who I just begged for.
Who's on page 2 of the theory of the case.
Well, that's exactly what just happened. That is exactly what just happened.
And so people and the Republican base is supposed to what here? Just oh yeah, cool, this is fun.
The people listening to this show, how are they supposed to process that?
I am upset that it was a secret ballot.
Right.
And I think that if members of Congress had to cast a vote for
But hang on, I don't want to criticize the effort, but the pitch going in was we needed a secret ballot so the guys could step up and say they could vote against Cheney and not be exposed. Was that not that was the theory of the guys whipping this?
That was not my theory of the case, but there were some that had that theory of the case. I believe if someone's not with you publicly, they're not with you.
I want everybody in this audience to contact their congressman today, and you should ask the congressman, call their office, email their office. You want to know how they voted. You understand it's a secret vote? That's fine, but you're my congressman. I want to know how you voted on this. I want to see how many. 61, I think, will come forward quickly. Everybody in this audience today, go forward and do this. Okay, I want to bring in now. We're going to go out to Wyoming, to Carbon County, to Joey Correnti IV, the guy that first put this forward as far as the censure of Liz Cheney and what's happening on Saturday. Joey, we only got a minute in this segment. I'm going to bring you back over, and I realize you're traveling today, but does anything that happened in Washington last night affect what you guys are going to do on Saturday in Wyoming?
I can't say it's not going to have any effect, but what I've seen so far is it's just amplified the concern of the base that we really don't have any support or representation in Washington. This wasn't a vote for Wyoming by Wyoming. This was a vote in the House. You got your K Street cabal and your Beltway buddies out there making their deals. And I don't think the voice of Wyoming voters was taken into consideration, but that's okay, because on Saturday we are going to have our own vote. And we realize that, there's limited effect on that, but I don't see this detracting at all. And as proof, we had yet another county meeting last night over on the eastern side of the state, where another county censured Liz Cheney shortly after this vote came out of the House of Representatives.
Joey, can you hang on for a second and take a short commercial break? We're going to return in Wyoming with Joey Correnti IV. Also, we're going to Arizona. Guess what? The state Senate out there is looking to arrest the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. We got Mark Finchem. We're also going to have Marianne Mendoza and Angel Mom. We're going to have Steve Cortes from Chicago, Bernie Kerik from New York about the crime wave that's going throughout the nation. Nobody will talk about polling, all of it, and Matt Gaetz in the House. Next on War Room.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Dispatches from the front lines of the MAGA revolution. The book is Firebrand. The author is Matt Gaetz, and he wrote every word of it. And more importantly, he's lived every word of it. The show today is nothing but firebrands. We got Joey Correnti IV from out in Wyoming. We got Mark Finchem, state representative in Arizona. We got Bernie Kerik up in New York. Steve Cortes from Chicago. Matt Palumbo, who runs the Dan Bongino site. Marianne Mendoza, Richard Barris, all firebrands. Why? Because they're the people that are making things happen. Action, action, action. I want to go back to Joey Correnti IV. Joey, so another came in last night. You're heading to this big thing on Saturday. The whole world's going to be watching because they said, "Hey, Washington D.C. voted last night. K Street voted, and they voted for Liz Cheney." They, quite frankly, don't care what you have to say. You're just a bunch of cowboys out in Wyoming, right? You're just a little guy. All we want you to do in the Cheney world is pay your taxes. Go to work, pay your taxes, and send your kids off to serve their nation in these foreign wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and all over the world. So, what do you think as you anticipate now? Is this last night going to hurt your momentum, or is it going to build momentum?
I think it's absolutely going to amplify what we're doing, because what we're doing has nothing to do with any of the concerns that Washington has that you just mentioned. We're reawakening the voice of the people and bringing it back to the power inherent in the people. So when things like this happen, I mean, this was, if you look at it as a single vote, it was a referendum. Over 60% voted to retain Representative Cheney in her leadership position. But she wasn't going to get pulled out of the House of Representatives no matter what, even if she lost her position. Our vote on Saturday, it's not going to be that massive referendum of, damnation or salvation for anybody. What it is instead a process that's taking us to the ballot box in 2022, where the real referendum will happen and where the voices will be heard. And it's going to happen across the nation. It's not just going to be here in Wyoming. Things like this have started to really wake up the populace and make them realize not only do they have the ability, but they have the responsibility to take care of this at the ballot box and make sure that every day between now and then is as uncomfortable and as painful as possible for them to ignore us and continue business as usual.
Joey, how do people get access to your social media coordinates webpage so they can find out more? We're going to try to broadcast live at least the start of the festivities on Saturday out in Wyoming on our Saturday show. How do people get to you?
Well, you can always get a hold of the Wyoming Republican Party at wyoming.gop, and then we're running a 98,000% increase on our site contact on Facebook on Carbon County, Wyoming Republican Party. So we're definitely working the social media as much as we can, and the word has gotten out. I get calls from all over the country all the time, so definitely reach out. We love having everybody's support, but we want to find a way to get in touch with people that are interested in doing this in their own communities and strengthening their own grassroots voices, because 2022 is going to be here before you know it.
Brother, thank you so much, Joey Correnti. Thank you, from Wyoming. I want everybody in this audience to go to that site now, to visit it, to learn from it, to support it. Matt Gaetz, want to go. But before we go to Arizona, we got good news here, folks. We got good news coming, okay? Just hang on. By the way, that's good news. Because you know why? That's the voice of the people. That's Vox Populi talking about what? The Great Awakening. The Great Awakening. The scales are coming off the American people's eyes, and I'm telling you, 2022 is going to be like 2010. And I'm saying, hey, get our gaze away from November 3rd. We got to vet that. And yesterday, Matt Gaetz on this show, which went viral, volunteered to resign his seat in Congress to go defend the president. We're going to ask Bernie Kerik about that in a few minutes. But I want to go back to last night. You've heard, you were out in Wyoming. You had the biggest crowd they've ever had for a political event that didn't have a rodeo attached to it. You gave a fire-breathing speech with almost 1,000 people in the bitter cold out there. It was Cheyenne, right? You were in Cheyenne, and you hear Joey, and we have these chairmen on all the time. It's all the same message. Where do you think we stand in this?
Well, remember, Eric Cantor would have been reelected as a Republican leader even after his voters threw him out. I mean, inside Washington, D.C., there is always a preference for the establishment, K Street favored person, for committee chairmanships, for leadership, for the things that bring trappings inside the Beltway. But what Joey, I think, accentuated is that this populist battle is one that we are going to have to engage in throughout the country, outside of Washington, D.C. And the Republicans, say to us, oh, well, we can't be fighting each other because we can't fight the Democrats. It's my expectation that the only way we win is if we are worthy of winning. Donald Trump showed us that, and we'll be worthy through the great work of Joey and other patriots throughout the country who are trying to get better representatives in Washington.
And Joey said, Joey said right there, it's our responsibility. I want to go, okay, so listen, don't think we're saying, just focus on 2022. It's here and now, and let's go to, because the wound of November 3rd has not been healed. In fact, it's only getting, I think, more infected because the Democrats and mainstream media do not want to address it. Unfortunately, I think President Trump's lawyers, although I agree with what they're doing on the parts of the Constitution, they're not addressing it either. They're taking the the Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell strategy, which we adamantly oppose. But I want to go now to a victory. About November 3rd, I want to bring in Mark Finchem. Mark, explain to us, because the Associated Press has got a story. I think the headline says the state Senate of Arizona is kind of working on some sort of order to arrest the commissioners who run Maricopa County. Can you explain to our audience what's happening?
Yeah, good morning, Steve. So the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors were served a couple of subpoenas. A lot of that was resultant from the November 30 hearing that we had, which set up the Senate hearing. My hat is off to my colleague, Senator Sonny Borelli, over on the other side of the plaza. He's been wrangling this thing and really driving it through the Senate. President Karen Fann issued yesterday Senate Resolution 1005, which basically says all 5 Maricopa County supervisors are in contempt of the Arizona Senate for failing to comply with the subpoena executed by the President of the Arizona Senate. And they have repeatedly and willfully delayed and obstructed a vital and duly authorized investigation by the Arizona Senate. The consequences of that are, we will come arrest you Monday morning after this. So there's some process things that have to happen. But the resolution was introduced yesterday. The first and second read it. It's got to be a couple of days before we can actually have third read on it, which means Monday they'll be able to have the vote on the floor. Once that passes, the Senate president will instruct the sergeant-at-arms to go to their offices and arrest them for failing to comply with subpoenas.
Can a sergeant-at-arms, are you actually saying, because I love this, are you actually saying that the state Senate of Arizona is so worked up on this now, guys who would not have a special session so we could actually get all this out in November? Just saying. They're so worked up now because the supervisors are fighting them. They're actually going to pass something because the subpoena's been blown off. Bring the sergeant at arms over to arrest the supervisors of Maricopa County, which is, people should understand, is Phoenix. And I think 65% of the population of the state, the great state of Arizona, which is 11 electoral votes. Is that what you're telling me?
That is exactly what I'm telling you. And here's evidence of that. Let me read a post that one of the supervisors put out yesterday. Not only is it illegal under Arizona state law for the board to turn over custody of the ballots, it is also unfathomable that the Arizona Senate has hired a known and frequent debunked conspiracy theorist to conduct the audit. They don't even know who's going to do the audit. Operational security. We have not communicated, the Senate has not communicated who's actually going to do the audit. So if they weren't terrified of what's going on, he wouldn't have put that tweet out. And here's another problem. This is fairly new since we talked yesterday. There's a requirement in Arizona law that the ballots themselves are to be placed in the custody of the state treasurer after the canvassing of the ballot. So the official sign off on the ballot. That never happened. The state treasurer has been subpoenaed also to produce the ballots. He basically told the Senate, look, I'd love to comply. I don't have them yet. They haven't been sent to me. That's a Class 2 misdemeanor.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody understands this, because CNN and the New York Times on the 77 days, the 77 days of Trump's illegal effort, the 5 Pulitzer Prize winners, 10,000 words, 7 pages of our beloved paper of record of our republic, the New York Times, says there's all lies. It's all baseless. There's no facts. There's no evidence. And yet in Arizona, the state Senate, the duly elected body, is about to arrest an elected body of Maricopa County supervisors because the Maricopa County supervisors, and let me just simplify it, don't want to turn over the machines and the ballots for actual an inspection of somebody that the state Senate says it should be their consultants or their advisors. Is that it in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, yeah. So, I mean, you're not gonna issue that subpoena without probable cause. Well, November 30th gave us more than probable cause. In fact, it gave us clear and convincing. I know Matt Gaetz is going to get this. It's like, what else do we need to show you? We have the receipts. Now we want to have the things that created the receipts. And I think that the Senate has just, there were a lot of people early on that were very skeptical. Okay, the more these guys slow walk this, the more they subvert, the more they obfuscate, the more they refuse to comply with subpoena after subpoena, with deadline after deadline, court cases, lawyering up, all of that garbage. Even the ones who were skeptical are now saying, you know, where there's smoke, there's probably fire. Well, now this has gone from just a small grass fire to a forest fire. This state is lit up. The polity here is not, this ain't going away. I've said that so many times. It ain't going away until we are able to, and this isn't about President Trump, by the way. This is about a free and fair election. Because if we can't rely on our stuff.
We got to bounce. Give it real quickly. You got 15 seconds. Give us your social media courts. Everybody wants to follow this. How do they get to you?
Okay. The only place I'm at now is on Gab because I got basically in jail for everything else. At AZ Honey Badger on Gab.
Of course.
God. Okay.
Thank you very
Finchem.
much for the honor.
Okay, brother. I tell you what. They're fighting in the hinterland of this nation. Do not give up. The fight is now. Gaetz, Kassan, Bannon, back in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, during the times of plague, you've got to keep focus. Action, action, action. Gaetz, what do you think? Here's Arizona. They're fighting like crazy. Now they're getting engaged. We're going to get Bernie's. Bernie's got some details about this, what happened. Your thoughts?
Certainly would have been nice to have a little more action a little earlier from our friends in Arizona. My thought is that I'm shocked that AZ Honey Badger was even available on Gab.
I want to go to Bernie Kerik. Bernie, give us some background. You know Finchem. You guys were out there with Rudy. It had the huge hearing. I think it went 14 hours. You were all over the Maricopa County guys at the time. To Gaetz's point, why didn't this happen back in November? It was, I think, the third week of November. You guys were out there. Maricopa County was all engaged, or at least some. Why didn't this happen back then instead happening now in the first couple of weeks of February?
Well, what's funny is to watch it from today. You know, I know, and anybody that was with me on the legal team knows that if it wasn't for Finchem and Borelli, this thing would have been swept under the rug back then because Fan didn't want to do anything. All of a sudden, now she's on board, now she gets it. But at that time, Steve, I actually had the Maricopa County Commissioner in an office 35 feet away from the Senate hearing where we were sitting, went into that office, spoke to him. He was going to go back to Maricopa County, give us access to the machines, give us access to the ballots, walked out of the room, and we never heard from him again. So I don't know what happened when he got back to Maricopa County.
Well, they retained lawyers.
But the whole thing went south. And if it wasn't for Borelli and Finchem, this thing would have been over back in November.
I just want one question, and this is not to disparage Dominion, but here's what I don't understand from the county commissioners. Why is the hill they're going to die on turning over all access and working with the state Senate and getting consultants that everybody can agree to or third party? Why is the hill they're going to die on this argument about the proprietary nature of the software and all this stuff related? This is what the lawyers told them first after you met with them. Why do you believe, given your knowledge, that supervisors who are publicly elected and control, I think, 4-1 Republican, why is the hill they're dying on the protection of the Dominion voting systems and its proprietary software?
Well, look, you have to look at what's been said, what's been reported, the evidence that's been found. I don't think they want anybody, and keep this in mind, Steve, I think this is the bigger picture, and this is why Gaetz is so important here. There's a bigger picture here. Nobody wants the American people, the total American people, not just the people that watch Fox, not just the people that watch Newsmax or the War Room. Nobody wants the entire nation to know what really happened, because they would be fuming. They would be outraged. And I think there are Republicans, there's plenty of Democrats, but there are Republicans too that are trying to stop this from going forward, just like the impeachment. Just like we're not going to talk about the stolen election in the impeachment, which is nonsense.
There's definitely Republicans, because this is the argument I made when guys talking about Insurrection Act. I say, hey, look, last time I looked in Georgia, all the executives were Republican. The House and the Senate are Republicans, just like in Arizona. And you own all the assemblies, all the state legislatures in random states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania all happen to be Republican. It was all Republican establishment.
Hey, Bernie, this is Matt Gaetz. I remember in 2018 watching Democrats try to execute on some of these tactics to have a large number of unaccounted for mail-in ballots in the state of Florida to try to rob the victory from Ron DeSantis. Scott, we were able to catch them in the act, bringing some of these large trucks in late at night, and we were able to disrupt that effort. Now we saw it on a far grander scale. The ability to catch them in the act was not something we had, so we're having to do it afterwards. My question to you is this. What do you think is the next evolution of this fraud, right? I mean, are they going to run the same plays out of the same playbook? You know, you've got an investigative background. What should we be looking for? Because here's my fear, and we had a little bit of a disagreement about this on the War Room. Once the fraud has happened, once they've stolen it,
can't reset it.
It is just so incredibly hard to go back and reverse engineer an election.
The reason your answer is important, a third of the deplorables are curled up in the bed in the fetal position because they say it doesn't matter anymore. I don't need elections. Phone's blown up. Don't talk about 2022 because you haven't solved the problem of stealing. Once they steal it first, you're never going to reverse it. Bernie.
There's two problems. One, you have to fix the system now before we get to 2022, because you're going to have the same thing we did in, let's say, Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, where they basically stopped every Republican observer. We went into a court. The court said you have to let them in. We went back in. They said, no, we're still not letting you in. We called the sheriff. The sheriff said, I'm not enforcing the order. And we were left out in the cold. You know what? The courts are going against us. They're in Democratic strongholds. Yep. If you don't fix this, if Matt Gaetz and people like him aren't out there doing what they're doing today, this thing is never going to get fixed.
Okay, but let me tell you where this gets.
It's up to the state legislators to get it done.
But this is where it gets fixed. That's why you got to be in the well of the Senate next week arguing this. If you're not there, I know your staff's head's blown up. If you're not there arguing this and bringing up what Bernie just said about Philadelphia, bringing in the evidence in Maricopa County, hammering in front of the nation, because we know 81% of the Republicans believe this is illegitimate or illegal. 40% of the American people. And why? Because those people have been exposed to the Bernie Keriks and the Rudys and the Mark Finchems and guys around the nation that talk about the details of the indefinitely confined in Wisconsin and the early voting scam. Once the American people, particularly independents, we know now, I think CNN's poll says 30% of independents, once the American people see it adjudicated in a venue historically like the United States Senate, and this would be something like out of the Roman Republic, right? You know, Cato the Elder comes back to argue, and I'd bring Trump in too. It's their prosecution is a TV script. It's not a legal document. You're a great lawyer. You know that. They've written a TV script.
Hey,
the
Steve,
only way to reverse this is to have Yes, go ahead.
Hold on. Let me say this one thing before Matt starts. Here's what I have: a really good recommendation. I recommend that the president gets rid of all those idiots around him and put somebody like Matt Gaetz in his office, make him his chief of staff, do something like that. Where he's going to have credibility.
Well, I appreciate the endorsement.
I did not work this with Bernie earlier, but that's what I've been saying. And by the way, I'm not the people down there are fine. You just need a firebrand by the book. You need the firebrand. You need a firebrand down there in Mar-a-Lago. We need a firebrand.
Well,
what do you say?
I am not going to offer to quit my job 2 days in a row on War Room. Yesterday was enough, but I think Bernie, we've got to talk tactically about how to do this because you've highlighted the importance of it. Any senator during this trial can submit any written question that they would like.
Yep.
So even if President Trump's legal team doesn't intend to put on the evidence of a stolen election before the Senate, we need one senator with the right questions to be able to ripen those issues. And we could actually, even if it's not part of the structured, planned defense, because of the unique nature of the Senate, we could actually still do it. We need one senator with good questions.
Matt Gaetz is giving you more inside baseball. Yesterday he talked about he's got a free option here. 45 guys can't vote to convict because they've already voted as unconstitutional. So the most votes he can get to convict are the 5. He's free. The Lindsey Graham argument, and you saw the Senator Kramer from North Dakota, it doesn't wash. You can't vote for that. The other inside baseball is what Gaetz just said. Because remember, last time the impeachment, they're asking all these questions. Hey, you don't have to follow the script. You can just ask a question. By the way, I see where a big part of the indictment is taken from the New York Times, your 77 days. I got a question. Do you have any thoughts about these 77 days? Whoa. You can answer right there. You have to be ready to answer.
Yeah, but they're not going to.
Well, hang on. Not so quick there, shipmate. We got many things here. Okay, Bernie, I really got to go to a story, and I want Gaetz in here because he's a great lawyer. One thing is not being reported in this country now is the lawlessness that is not just New York City, Chicago, around the nation. You're former commissioner of New York City Police. Tell us what's going on. What do people have to know? We're going to get Cortes in a minute here from Chicago. What is going on throughout the nation on the crime side that's not being reported?
Well, look, just this last month, there are 51 homicides in Chicago. 51 homicides in a month, in 30 days, a 63%, a 46% with the prior month. And here's the big one for me, Steve. 218 carjackings in a month in the city of Chicago. I don't know who can ride their car around Chicago without getting jacked. That's a big problem. Same thing's going on in New York City. 777 murders in 19, 1,531 in 20. Like, it's up 44%. Every one of these cities, whether it's Chicago, Atlanta, New York City, Baltimore, Minneapolis, they're all run by Democrats. They're all Democratic strongholds, and most of them very far left-leaning Marxist-type leaders that are basically villainizing the cops, victimizing the thugs, which is kind of why I like Florida these days. You have a governor that's doing his job, a governor that's holding people accountable, enforcing the law.
Because Gaetz worked his tail off.
These other cities and these other states, they're just not doing it.
You stay right there, Bernie. Don't leave. I want to bring in Steve Cortes. Can we bring in Steve Cortes right now? Steve, I know you're here for a different reason. I want to talk about the editorial, about what you're doing in Navarre and the evidence. Bernie, hang. Steve, you're a Chicago guy. You're in Chicago. Is Bernie Kerik right? Is that a city that's now out of control and not being reported nationwide?
100%. Listen, I take no pleasure in saying this as a Chicagoan. I think it is the most dangerous place in the developed world. And the statistics back me up on that, by the way. For 2020, shootings and homicides were up 50% from 2019, from an already elevated level. The latest scary, really terrifying trend in Chicago is carjackings, which are out of control. There were over 600 of them in 2019. It more than doubled into 2020. There were over 1,400 of them. Already in this new year, despite winter weather, there's over 150 carjackings in 2021. And Steve, what is most, in some ways, I think, educational in a way, or informative about these carjackings is that so many of them are being committed by young teens, people who don't even have their driver's license, who shouldn't be driving a car legally, much less stealing one at gunpoint. These are 14, 15-year-old boys, young men. They're not in school. They're not playing sports. They have nothing constructive to do. You combine that with a Soros-backed prosecutor in Chicago who will not prosecute even violent crimes, and we have an absolutely combustible situation here. Chicago is in chaos.
Steve, just hang on. Bernie, can people get your social media? I want to make sure people can follow you during the day and your radio show on Saturday.
Bernard Kerik on Twitter. That's the best way to get me.
And what time is the radio show? Is on Saturday afternoon, is it? 2 or 3 o'clock, WABC?
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
on Saturdays.
2 p.m. Bernie Kerik every Saturday on WABC, right after the War Room's over. So it's a great time to listen. It's always great guests, very intense. Bernie, thank you so much for joining us today on War Room.
Thanks, Steve.
Bernie Kerik. It's Bernie's work as investigators, the evidence, is so much of what we call the receipts that can be shown in the Senate in the trial of Donald J. Trump. We've got a hard out with Cortes. We're going to bring Cortes back. Cortes got an editorial day talking about Peter Navarro. Dr. Navarro's combined all three episodes or all three volumes of the Navarro reports. He's now got it. Steve Cortes is going to give us a heads up. It's what Matt Gaetz can use as his Bible next week when he's in the well of the U.S. Senate arguing as President Trump's lawyer. We're going to take a short commercial break. We've got Cortes. We've got Matt Palumbo from the Bongino Report. We've got Richard Barris, the great pollster. All to come. Plus an update on Dr. Fauci and the vaccines for your kids. Remember, Dr. Fauci said Vaccinating the children is the key to herd immunity. And you heard CNN's new report at the top. We've got years to go in this plague, but the key is herd immunity. Okay, Cortes, next on War and Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
The country's devolving into lawlessness. It's not Steve Bannon saying. You got a website, our production staff, the ever-productive War Room engine room is all over heyjackass.com. I'm bringing Steve Cortes. Besides Steve Cortes being the smartest hedge fund guy associated from the pits of Chicago, associated with the MAGA movement, really the voice of MAGA economics, he and Peter Navarro. He's also a Chicagoan, loves Chicago. Cortes, this one I'll get. It is one of the greatest cities in the world with great people, great sports team, a great ethos. It is such a beloved city.
And the Cubs.
And the Cubs. So brutal. You go.
I'm White Sox, but go ahead.
You go out in the Midwest. Southside guy, you're so tough. I know you're a populist. You go in the Midwest and people love Chicago. They love going there. Is this heyjackass.com? Because this thing's got police reports. It blows your head up. By the way, everybody in the audience, go to heyjackass.com.
Right.
If Cortez, is it accurate?
100%. Listen, it's a silly name, but it's a serious website. And by the way, that is verified by my cop buddies. And I've got a lot of cop friends in the city of Chicago, and they all tell me that's where they go when they want to know the actual truth, because you won't get it from corporate media. You certainly won't get it from the city government of Chicago. But to your point, too, of why people should care who don't live in the city of Chicago, as I do, Chicago is the beating heart of America. It really is. You know, for decades, I've told people in my international travels, if you want to know America, you can't go to San Francisco or New York. I'd always tell them, go to Chicago. You know, that's where you'll find the America, the Chicago described by Saul Bellow and countless authors over the years. So what's happening in America is a sickness in the heart of America. It's because of policy. It's not because of the good citizens of this amazing city. This place is being literally ruined by blue policies. And I warned this a lot during the campaign, and I'm going to continue to warn America. The present reality of Chicago is what Biden and the Democrats want for all of America nationwide. That is the future they have in store for you, a future of statism, of corruption, bereft of opportunity, of defund the police, of prosecutors who are in the pocket of George Soros. That is the reality they want for the nation. So I say, as a Chicagoan, I am warning you, you do not want to become the rest of America what Chicago is now.
Steve,
this is a call for the country.
Steve, this is Matt Gaetz. So in the House Judiciary Committee, every week I hear Democrats trying to enact every policy possible to keep the cops in the car, whether it's taking their immunities away, whether it's limiting their access to like body protection. It's all about ensuring that you don't have proactive policing. So what has been your observation about how policing has reacted to this rise in violence, and whether or not what we hear coming out of Washington is negatively impacting Chicago and then could have that same negative metastasizing impact across the country?
You know, Congressman, absolutely. What you're talking about in Washington is a part of the problem here in Chicago, and I suspect in other large cities. When I talk to cops here, what they tell me is they know that the political leadership of the city never has their back. That if there is ever a question about police actions, that the default position of people like Mayor Lightfoot here in Chicago and State's Attorney, the prosecutor for Cook County, Kim Foxx, their default position is to attack the cops, is to always take the perpetrator's side. And so given that, they are incredibly hesitant to be proactive, which is understandable. They don't want to end up in cuffs themselves. They don't want to end up on the front page of the newspaper. And so they tend to show up, and I'm not blaming the cops for this at all, but they tend to show up, to your point, after the fact, rather than trying to prevent the violence in the first place.
Okay, we really want to pivot quickly to from violence to the steal on November 3rd, okay? Peter Navarro's combined all three reports. This is the basis for arguing next week about to counter the Democrats' prosecution of the president, to say this thing was all phony. It was the big lie. You make the argument, Navarro makes the argument, it's the big steal. You've written an introduction to that report that I think now is an op-ed. Tell us where it is, and what does your introduction to this report say?
That's correct. So my op-ed is just published at the Washington Times, and I'm saying that the Navarro report should be, number one, required reading for all citizens out there in the country. But number two, it should be the cornerstone. It should be in some ways the rubric for the defense of the president in the well of the Senate. And what I mean by that is the president has finally been handed an opportunity. He's been deplatformed by the oligarchs of big tech. And by the way, big tech and corporate media, forget about the president for a moment, President Trump, they won't even let regular citizens have even the discussion about the problems with the November 3rd vote, about the statistical anomalies, the provable fraud, and the constitutional violations that mar that vote. We can't even have that discussion. But here, President Trump has an opportunity handed to him because of the sham indictment, the sham impeachment, to get in front of the nation, to go to the well of the Senate and make the case. And what I'm saying to him, what I'm imploring the president and his team to do, is use the Navarro report, which is heavily cited, hundreds of citations from thousands of documents. This isn't conspiracy theorizing, Steve. This is real documentable proof of the massive problems that throw into question, that really invalidate, in my view, the votes of these contested states. And the president's going to have that opportunity to make that case directly to the American people. If he does so powerfully, I think he turns this proceeding around. He turns the legal guns around that are now pointed at him and instead points them at the Congress itself, as well as at the state legislatures and state officials in these respective contested battleground states who unfortunately did not do their constitutional duty.
But now do the converse, Steve. What happens if this trial becomes an academic discussion of impeachment jurisdiction aligned with
severability,
with severability and those things? If we don't have a robust defense of an honest election, what happens?
Right. No, listen, I fear that, and I fear that that's the way things are headed right now. That is the present inertia, but I think we can reverse it, because here's my problem with that. If we go the technical route of jurisdiction, right, if there's a technical not guilty, that is no exoneration of the president. That is certainly not a propellant for him in terms of his personal political viability and potency, nor is it for the movement and just for the truth itself, if I can get more philosophical about it. We have to play. Here's the thing. The Democrats are going to play theater. If you read their brief, which I did, their 80-page brief, it reads in many ways like a TV script or a movie script. We can't answer that with legal technicalities and pretend that we're in a law school classroom. No, we have to grab the stage and go for the grand exoneration. To bring Chicago into it, make no small plans. That was the exhortation of Daniel Burnham when Chicago burned to the ground in 1871, and he led the rebuilding of this amazing city, the Renaissance of Chicago, and he said, make no little plans. They have no power to stir men's souls. I would say the same to the Trump defense team.
We're going to put the whole thing up in the next segment. We're going to get to that, but you've got a special. You're going to be on, I think you're hosting the Greg Kelly Show tomorrow night on Newsmax. Is that still a go?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's 7 o'clock on Newsmax. Steve Cortes, you're going to be the sole host for an entire hour?
That's correct, Steve.
Okay, Steve Cortes, tomorrow night on Newsmax, 7 o'clock. Cortes is the best in the nation.
Must have missed my invite.
He's doing your podcast today. Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. We got another killer in the house. It's the Killer Elite, Raheem Kassam, Matt Gaetz, and now joined by Jack Posobiec. We're going to be here. Got Matt Palumbo, too, coming in for the Bongino Report. How intense is that going to be? All next. War and Pandemic.